Ifemi, good to go. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Think and Reimagined podcast. I am Nifemi Ogutoye. I have Stanley Evans joining us on this one. Mr. Evans is a member of the Order of the British Empire. I believe we met once during Think and Reimagined event at Bature. He's a business leader and environmentalist. He's also the deputy chair of the British Business Group Nigeria. He's been a chair for some 6 years now. At age 15, Mr. Evans joined the Scientific Equipment Designers Digitimer,
You've Googled
where
me.
he worked his way through the industry in due course and also started his own business. It's good to have you join us on this one, Stanley.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Is my microphone off? No, it's on, isn't it? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah, good. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Welcome on board. I'm also joined by Benny Finisher. Benny Finisher is a Nigerian performing and creative artist with expressions and acting. He's a poet. He serves as creative director and consultant with Magni Cedar Production House. And there's a long list here. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Finisher. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's begin this conversation. We're talking about masculinity and societal expectation. We've titled this one Boys to Men. It's quite interesting, the kind of conversations that we hear these days about, for instance, the girl child. You know, they say in the past 50 years, the conversation regarding getting a better quality of life for the girl child has become so pronounced that, like before, women can aspire not only to outdo themselves, but also to even do better than the other gender. However, some would say there's been a neglect for the boy child, and its impact also on the quality of men that we see these days. But I'd like us to begin by talking about what you consider to be a real man, what the society told you a real man should be, and what you're learning to be, the concept of a real man. Who's going to start? Let's begin with Mr. Finisher.
So now you want the finisher to start.
Exactly.
All right. I think not think, because it's become the norm now. Because when you use the word man, it's synonymous to strength. It's synonymous to being bold, being upfront, being the go-getter. Because you often see, that's why when the female try to do something with confidence or is confrontational, they tend to go, oh, why are you talking? Why are you being a man or something? Or you hear phrases like man up. So it's not really about the gender. It's because it's now synonymous to strength. So when they say man up, you know what they mean is put yourself together. So imagine looking at a lady and you're telling the lady to man up. So it's more like you are telling her being a female is something else. Or you see a man who is connected to his emotions, who maybe even crying, and you hear statements like, why are you acting like a woman? So now when you say man, what we hear, what is expected of the man is the man is not expected to cry. You shouldn't cry. As a man, you have to know what to do, when to do, and how to do it. As a man, you're not shouldn't express pain even when you feel it. to be able to hold pain till it becomes unbearable. As a man, you should always be ready to make provisions for whatever it is that's needed. As a man, you should have, if not all the answers, but almost all the answers.
Absolutely.
And as the man, you're not expected to act or be weak. So much expectation. So this now puts a whole lot of work on the man, and it's even worse when the man is not being raised by a present man, so to speak. So now he goes out there in the world and he has all these expectations. So he beats about the bush trying to become what they expect him to become, even when he himself doesn't understand what it means to be a man and what is expected. So it's more of what is expected of him than what it really means to be a man. So he's not being the man, he's being that man they expect him to be. So
wow,
that's it basically.
What a way to put it. It sounds like there's a lot of pressure on man. But let me ask Stanley Evans, who has lived in Europe and India, in West Africa, perhaps having lived through these different cultures, is it the same experience? Is it the same expectation, the same society expectation for a man?
It's an interesting question. I was trying to view it from my perspective in terms of where I've gone along the road in life. I'm older than anybody else on this platform. In fact, I'm probably older than everybody. I can remember, I'm so old, I can remember when the Dead Sea was just ill. So I think I'd quote you, first of all, from Corinthians, and St. Paul said, "Thou must not be all things to all men." So both of my parents were, they never spoke English as a first language. And as you mentioned, I left school at 15. So I had 5 siblings, and we were very poor in the UK, which, poorness is relative, but at the age of 6, I couldn't go to school because I had no shoes. I was desperately poor. But I was brought up to believe that I should help other people, just as the country helped me. I mean, it gave my parents the ability to give us an education, a doctor, a dentist, and so on. And in fact, the health service in Britain saved my life when I was a child because I had advanced pneumonia. So I've always tried to pay back. So I've tried to behave like a man, but in reality, I've tried to behave like a fair human being. So you mentioned and alluded to the fact that I'd worked in Asia and here. So for 14 years, I've worked very hard to help other people via the British Business Group. So my perspective, my view on it is that I have tried to be a better person as a man. And I'm conscious of the fact as well that I've got 3 daughters, and Dr. Amma knows the story. And when I first joined the British Business Group here, it was made up of 18 grey-haired white men, all over the age of 70, that wouldn't make it through another British winter, let alone COVID-19. So I set about to change that. And the perspective, or the fact and reality now of the British Business Group here is that it's got an equal gender split. And I would think that maybe 60 to 70% of the members are Black British. So what I've tried to do there again is behave like a man, like a human being ought to behave in contemporary society, because society is where we are now. So that's my view on it.
It's a very interesting perspective. I'm told that Tolu Oni has joined us now, and I'd love to also hear from him. Tolu Oni is a finance professional from the Imperial College London, and he currently also sits as young advisor to the UK policy think tank, Chatham House. Tolu, we're talking about what you consider to be a real man. Firstly, what you were told growing up and what you're finding out now.
Hi, Nifemi. Hi. Thanks for having me on here. Very nice. Very glad to be here. again. If I can just repeat what you said. You said that we're discussing what it means to be a real man and what I was told growing up. Was that the question, please? You sent me hi.
So look, I didn't get that.
Okay, I was just making sure I got the question from you. The question is, in my own opinion, what does it mean to be a real man, and what was I told?
What does it mean to be a real man? What were you
Yeah.
told growing up? What have you found out now that you're a man?
Yeah. Okay, so I think first and foremost, I don't think anybody particularly tells you what it means to be a man. As a young person growing up, you're more likely to look at what men are and then take that on as what you're told. So you're more likely to sort of absorb what men around you do and then shape that in your mind to be the definition of what a man is. I think growing up, and I actually did have an interesting growing up phase. Early part of my years were spent in Nigeria. Then I went over to the UK for education, which was a bit of a culture shift. And now I'm back working in Nigeria. So I've had to really sort of experience different perspectives on the matter. I would say that the consolidated view I got of who a man was somebody who was responsible for providing, somebody who, if there's ever any danger, he's the one that stands in front, someone who will make the hard decisions. And I think what that almost did to me was sort of carve out this sort of Superman who doesn't get fazed by events, always has the best answer to things, and always has the smartest responses to situations that pop up in life. But you find that really isn't always the case. I'm having to learn or unlearn some things and learn new things, that asking for help, sharing challenges with people, not having the answer and giving people a reason to actually add value to your life, being a human being, having true relationships, as opposed to a perspective where you already identify where you should fit in a relationship. Equal people can bring equal amount of value to any form of a relationship. I'm having to learn that, and I think we would be doing each other a disservice to sort of state what gender roles should be and then generalize that for every community or every relationship that people find themselves in. I think that people should work to their strengths. I'm having to look inwards more as opposed to sort of like the external picture that was painted. And it could be painted through cartoons, painted through Top Gun, painted through Hollywood or Nollywood or whatever it is that shapes culture. Those are the things you hear. And all of these experiences form what your definition of a particular thing or concept is. And again, I'm having to relearn and really just understand that everybody is unique and the way you approach life is unique.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of gender stereotypes, like you said, that constantly put men under a lot of pressure. Earlier on, we talked about the concept of manning up, being a man, the fact that they say men don't cry, and the man of expectation, which is huge, really, and that plays a significant role in what inspires and what encourages men to do what they do. It has driven some men to innovate. It has driven some others to crime. It has increased the involvement of young men in cybercrime that we call Yahoo in Nigeria. Recently there was a lot of craze about money ritual, and a lot of young men who just feel that you can't define masculinity without the concept of provision, which is key. In the African setup, for instance, you are not considered to be a father until you have a male child. So you see people have as many female children until they finally get the man. In Yoruba, they call him Arole. He's expected to carry on, carry on the legacy of the family. And there's a lot of, factors like that. But let us speak to some of the things that we've identified, in our journey from being boys to men as key roles that a man must pay attention to in a changing society. So for instance, if you're married, you find out that the gender roles are also quickly changing. Gone are the days when the man is solely the provider for the family. The woman also brings something to the table. There are even some men who rely mostly on their woman to feed them. I don't know how acceptable that is becoming, but what have you identified to be, certain key roles? And I'm beginning with you, Finisher. Certain unique roles that a man must play in this current day and time.
Thank you, Nifemi. First and foremost, I would say a man needs to have knowledge of life itself, and because of the expectations we have, you need to expose yourself to knowledge. So when you are being asked questions or being asked for insights in decision making, you should be able to help. And if you're not unable to help at that moment, you should be humble enough to say, I don't know, but I can find out. So you're expected to know and seek knowledge consistently. That's one. And secondly, you have to live a life that serves as an example to the boys. Because now we see a boy and we think boy is just living his life. Consciously or subconsciously, the boy has tailored his life based on what he has seen, he has experienced, or which is either in his environment, on social media, on television, whatever it is he enjoyed it from. So he sees a particular image as a boy, he wants to become that. And the stronger one has more influence on him. So if the image is not in the house, he finds it outside. If it's not outside, he finds it on the media. So when he picks it up, starts to tailor his life just in that direction. It's the way he wants to talk about it, he wants to based on what he's heard or seen the person do. So you expected to not just live as an, you should be conscious of yourself. You should leave the
Just me. It appears I can't hear Finisher well. Just a minute.
No, I can't either.
Oh, I think the audio is distorted. So let me skip your turn and then I'll return to you, Finisher. Hopefully that your network gets better. But I could hardly hear you. But just hold on to that. I'll be back with you. Hopefully that we can hear you clearly. Stanley Evans, you mentioned a lot about seeing yourself first as a human being, and I think that's a Western reality that Africans are gradually buying into. The idea of gender equality, that the fact that you're a man doesn't make you necessarily better than the other gender. Perhaps you can talk to us about the importance of that perspective to life and how you see it play out in Africa.
Again, that's an interesting question. How do I see it playing out in Africa? I can't comment on the whole of Africa, but I'll make an observation for Nigeria. I was at a meeting yesterday and a further one this morning, and at both of those meetings, they mentioned the statistic that 50% of the population of Nigeria is under the age of 25. And that percentage will obviously increase because we've got, I think, the third highest birth rate in the world. And the future, they also touched on climate change. The future is not looking good for any country, but it's so whilst Africa as a continent only emits 7% of the world's CO2, as the population grows here and in the rest of Africa, it's going to become ever more important. So I think that's where role models come in. So I like to act as a role model to both men and women as a citizen on this planet. And we've only borrowed our time on this planet. Firstly, I'd like to apologize as well, because it's our generation that have created the majority of the CO2. So I tried to think back to the role models that have guided me. And one of them was my mother, bizarrely, because my father was much older. And she said that as you go about your business, learn. And she said, always give somebody time to speak to you, irrespective of what they do. So it could be the CEO of a company or the person sweeping the floor. Always give them time and listen to them. And remember that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you speak. So that's my observation in terms of role modeling, which has made me become the person I have. But here, if I just come back to climate change, because this is something that's going to be so critically important for men growing up and for women growing up, because the world is in a mess, let's be fair. The role models that are here, the big oggers, the men and women that have been successful here, should also be mindful of climate change. And one of the things here I cannot understand is the Mercedes G-Wagon that's driven. There's a vehicle that's so polluting, they can't make it in Germany. It's built in India. Yeah, they can't make any component in Germany because they trace pollution at source. And that's 11 times more polluting than a Range Rover hybrid. A Range Rover hybrid would emit, 14 times more polluting. That will emit 27 grams of CO2, and the G-Wagon emits 486. So in terms of transitioning into a cleaner future, as I say, it's only 7% that the African continent emits. But the role models have got to demonstrate that they're aware of climate change as well, because the young Nigerians that are coming through are very aware of it. They're very aware of the challenge, and I've seen that. So they're my observations on it.
I like the way you have wired the environment into this conversation. Do you, however, see men playing more significant role in this than women?
No, it's got to be equal. And as society and life moves on, I mean, I heard a story from somebody at the meeting yesterday where she works for a government organization, a very large government organization. And her colleague was crying. Her colleague was crying. There we are. There's a man showing his gentler self, because he'd applied for a job and he was automatically sidelined because he was not a female, because they have to have a gender balance, a 50-50 gender balance. And so the role had to be fulfilled by a female.
Interesting. So do you think that the male gender is being threatened in a way with what appears to be an evolution, of awareness amongst the female folk? Because, for instance, there hasn't been what appears to be a commensurate movement, compared to how we've seen people talk about inclusion for the female gender. Do you think that in the coming years, the advocacy will tilt more to men because they might be a little bit more disadvantaged? Right now we're talking about inclusion for women. We're talking about, getting more women at the top in the place of leadership. But are you concerned that the way it's going, with little or nothing being mentioned about the boy child or the need to, develop the right thinking amongst young men, do you sense a change in balance in the coming years?
I think you've posed a very interesting question. I think it's worth looking back a bit. If you look at our civilization.
Can you hear me? That we've got in the balance.
Okay, sir. Was somebody speaking? Okay. So
I was, but I don't know whether my bandwidth is weak.
Oh, okay. I thought it was lagging a bit. Oh, okay. Thanks, Stanley. I was responding to Nifemi's question, and I was saying that it's worth looking a bit backwards into where we came from. As the human race started out with men having to go to war, men having to kill animals and bring home, because as men, we're stronger physically, well, on the average. And then obviously you get men having to go to factories, and we're here, where we are today because of a long line of history. And it's understandable that we've gotten to a point in our civilization where a lot of the value that is added at home, or value that is added in the office, in career, is more based on what you know than your physical capacity. So it only makes sense that there's equality. It only makes sense that what a man can do on a desk, on a finance desk like I'm on, a lady can do the same. A lady can do the same. So I can see why it's important that we're having this conversation. I can see why it's important that we get more women into places of power, places to make decisions. You know, if for an example, a government, if you have a government board or Senate board that's filled with 99% men, nobody can really bring a design thinking approach from a woman's perspective if you don't have a woman on the board. Because your reality, I have to now start to imagine, I don't live it. So it makes sense to have women in these places. It makes sense to have women making decisions. It does. Now, the conversation we're having is not feminism. Again, feminism is taking sort of like a very interesting turn, very many different definitions. So it's easier to say inclusion, right? And inclusion right now may mean getting women into more positions of power, but over the long term, it has to mean getting people, humans, into positions where they're more empowered, and not sidelining anybody for their race or for their gender or for whatever sexual orientation or for whatever it is that we as humans come up as reasons to differentiate ourselves. That would be my own response to that. Thank you.
Interesting. Felicia, I'm hoping that your network is better now. I'd like us to take this conversation to the man's relationship with the woman, which is where it gets a bit more interesting, because there's a lot of redefining taking place now, particularly in romantic relationships. So many years ago in Africa, the man is considered the head of the home, including the woman. A lot of that is changing now with what we now know as gender equality. There's a lot of single parenting, which is alien to the African culture. But how is knowledge evolving for you in this regard? And what do you consider to be the truth? Finisher, are you there?
I believe he's muted.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
All right. I think so. Can you switch off your video so that perhaps it can enhance your audio quality?
Let's see how it goes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think it's better. Please go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned some. I just need to get the question right. You said, which is the truth? How do you mean?
Oh yes, I was talking about the rapidly changing gender role when it comes to romantic relationship. I'm asking what lessons you're learning and how it's changing your relationship with the other sex.
Well, basically, for me, it's more of understanding, because if you're relating with someone and you don't understand who you're relating with, that's where conflict rises from. So it's helping me personally to understand the person I'm relating with, it helps to know, because when you understand who you're relating with, you know how to relate with them. So, which is quite interesting. And there's a lot of relearning, because you've been told this is how you treat the female, this is how you relate with them, this is how you talk to them. But when you understand how the other person wants to be treated, or how the other person sees life, or whatever it is you guys conversation you are having, then you are talking from the person's point of view. You're communicating to be understood, and for the other person to understand what you're communicating, not imposing your own way or asking, or it's more like you approach a lady and you tell her, I want you in my world. So what happens to her world? She should just abandon and come into your world. So I believe in you approaching her saying, can our words come together to build another world that we can enjoy with our children, with or without? So it shouldn't be, I want you in my world and just yours. So recognize, acknowledge, and respect the other person's world while not throwing yours away. So, but you bring both together to create a whole new one. So that's it for me. So, but for you to relate better, you need to understand who you're relating with, and come from the point of view of giving and receiving. So not just you pouring and expecting this to just open up and swallow. Hook, line,
I
and
get your
sinker.
point. Is there a sense to which this changing dynamics takes some pressure from the man? Because, the man prior to this time is expected to take the leadership role and be the sole provider. So if we're talking about co-leadership and two worlds, like you have put it, it would mean that if I'm taking a lady out on a date, we can possibly, share the bill. And then she can also bring as much equal financial contribution to the relationship. Do you think it is like it makes life easier for the man?
Well, deep down within the man's mind, he says, yeah, it makes it easier, but because of societal expectations, he wouldn't do it. Because it goes out and, like you suggested, wanting to share the bill on a date, and it goes, nah, I'll handle that. But even when the lady is saying, don't worry, we can do this, but he still wants to put up that persona because this is what is expected of him. It won't have the lady pick him up, even if the lady offers. So he would rather spend the money to hire a ride if he doesn't have one, to pick her up, because it's expected of him, being a gentleman, to do this and that. But deep down on the inside of him, he might just feel, okay, if we share, if you have a part in this, if you are co-captain in this ship, it would, you will be able to, I would have some sort of relief from certain things. But when you do it and you're caring about, what would people say if I'm seen doing this, or if I'm seen accepting this done from her? So the societal pressure is there. So you don't even know whether to just let it go or just still be the man, like they say. But
I like to hear Stanley's. I like to hear Stanley's contribution to this.
I suppose on a small part of that statement, I'd be very happy if the bill was split in a restaurant. No, look, guys, the world is changing. I mean, it's very refreshing that we're having this discussion. But the fact and reality is we're living in a different world, and it's got to be a sharing of responsibility. To come back to my childhood, the dominant leader in our family was my mother. Absolutely. So I guess I'm used to that. It was matriarchal as opposed to patriarchal. So I've never seen life in any other format. And when I was running the last company I ran in the UK, my immediate boss was female, and I was operations director. for a large company, and she was CEO. So it's the way the world is now, and it's the way the world must be. It's the way the world must be. Shared responsibilities.
Interesting. Not many of us grew up in that matriarchal structure, so we have a lot of unlearning and relearning to do to properly adjust and fit into this current world. We have to wrap up now, but I'd like you to share with me some of the biggest lessons you've learned for a man out there listening. For me, it's about taking care of myself. I grew up thinking that to man up and to be a real man means meeting every other person's needs apart from myself. But I got to a breaking point where I found out that if I don't get my welfare intact, I might not be able to be, that kind of provider. I might not even be alive to be able to be a man. Tolu, talk to me about some of the biggest lessons you've learned.
No, I certainly think that I'm with you. I echo what you say on that. That as a young man, life is definitely very different from what it was in my father's time. And now with me and my partner, like, we're very much about sharing responsibilities and sharing resources. Understanding also that I have to be able to share emotions as well, because as a man, as an African man, sometimes African men are just stoic, focused on being the provider and moving on. So share responsibilities, share emotions, and really share a life, and get to experience being in relationships, and as opposed to just playing a role. And like you said, it definitely takes, it's easier said than done. But having these sort of conversations and working hard at it to make it a lot more possible to achieve.
Fantastic. Finisher, what's your thought on these?
I'm just going to say, no matter how much of a man you choose to be or you want to be, try as much as possible to be human while at it, because being human means you see other people the way you see yourself. So it's not about control. It's not about you impressing anyone. It's really about you being human. So whoever has it, acknowledge and respect that. And if you, whatever it is you want, go for it and respect other people while at it. So it's just basically, while being a man, remember to be human at the same time. So
Stanley is the oldest in this panel and is perhaps in the world more than all of us. So take out your pen to receive wisdom. Stanley, what are the biggest lessons you've learned?
I'll give you two of them that were imparted to me many years ago. So when I first got a senior management position, a great guide and mentor, John Green, said to me, "You're going to have to make decisions." He said, sometimes you hesitate. He said, so what you need to do is take all the information you can, ask advice, put everything down, evaluate the information, then make a decision. It may not be the right decision, but make a decision based upon the best information you put together and based upon your own precept and example of experience. So make a decision. And he then added to that 10% of the decisions you make will probably not be the best decision. However, the volition and push of the other 90% will take the business forward. That's the first bit of advice. Make a decision, but make sure as much as you can that it's the right decision. The second piece of advice I'd give to any leader, male or female, is when you have a crisis, when you have a so-called crisis, when you think the world is falling apart in your environment, in your business, whatever, ask yourself this question: 5 years from now, will this matter in my life? 5 years from now, will it matter in my life? Because what matters in our life is our family, our children, our loved ones, our parents. Our family is what matters. And 5 years from now, you'll have your family, So evaluate any crisis and say to yourself, 5 years from now, will this matter? And that puts things into perspective.
Wow. I told you guys, right? Thank you for sharing, Stanley. Thank you. So it's been a sober conversation. Men really don't talk except they're hanging out over, a bottle of wine, or they are just shacking. It's very difficult to talk about the challenges with men. So I really appreciate you guys for coming out to have this conversation with me. Tolu, finance professional, thank you so much for sharing. Stanley Evans is a member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE. Maybe the next time you come on the show, you tell me how to be a member myself. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. And
It's
also,
good. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay.
Glad to have you. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. So we have the finisher joining us for the first time in this conversation. We look forward to hearing more from you and having you feature in subsequent episodes. Ben the Finisher is a Nigerian performing and creative artist. Thank you so much for joining this podcast. I'm Nifemi Oguntoye. See you some other time. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.